All right, hello everyone. Today I want to talk about one of my favorite books. That's this book right here, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, and why it's so important if you're an investor to read this book. So, this is a psychology book. Daniel Kahneman and his partner were some of the best psychologists in the 1980s, and they came up with hundreds of experiments. And in this book, it documents all like the most important experiments that were specifically um, concerned with the human biases in our brain. So I'll talk about that in a while, but you can start to imagine why it's really good to know about your own flaws in your brain when it comes to investing and how your natural mode of thinking isn't best suited to the stock market. So in this book, he describes there's two different systems in our brain. We have our system one, which is like our animal brain, which is our like fight or flight response brain, which is good if you see a lion. And system two is our logical brain. So if you see this image on the left here, what do you think? Which system will fare better? The one that's good at analyzing logically, or the one that just fucking runs, you know? Um. So yeah, it's system two. Sorry, system one that would be better in this case if you just saw the line, but it's system two that would um do better if after seeing a correction here of like 50% or so, as you can see on the very right of that chart. Yeah, you don't want your animal response to respond to that. So in this video, I'm just going to run through all the biases and everything, all the biases that are best, like that are most noteworthy with regards to investing. And I'm also going to, he actually talks about investing a few times within the book, even though it's a psychology book. So I'm just going to outline what he says about investing as well. So first, we'll run through a few of the biases. So the sunk cost fallacy. So this is a bias um, where if you put in money, if you put in anything and it hasn't worked out, um, you're more likely to put in more and more and more. Say I'm in a I'm playing roulette and I've put money on black 10 times. What are the chances I'm going to get red the next time? And it keeps coming up red and I'm putting money on black. So after 10 times, what's the chance that's going to be red again? But but it actually doesn't matter. It's still 50-50 no matter how many times has happened before. But it's a bias where we think, oh, I've lost this much money in this particular stock or this particular investment vehicle. I better put more money in it. My chances would change. Loss aversion. So loss aversion says like, okay, I'll give you the option. If I flip a coin, if it's heads, you win $1,000. If I flip a coin and it's tails, you lose $1,000. Most people would choose to not play the game rather than to play the game because the potential loss is worth more than the potential gain. Uh, However, if you played this game, but say the odds were changed, say it was $1,100 versus well, you would gain $1,100, but you would still lose $1,000. So obviously, if you played that game 100 times, you would be up on your money. But still, people would rather like say you can only play the game once. People will still probably choose to not lose $1,000 because the loss is worth more in their head. They would rather not lose than an equal potential gain, even an equal or greater potential gain. And if you found out that the price had to be like a $2,000 win to lose $1,000 in a in a coin flip. So you need to be aware of that. So if you're always trying to avoid losses, then you'll never, even if the odds are stacked in your favor, if you do that consistently throughout your life, you're going to be down. If the odds, say it's a $2,000 or a $1,500 upside, but a $1,000 downside, if you always pick not playing the game rather than always pick playing the game, you're better off always playing the game in those kind of senses. But that's just a human bias. Kind of makes sense. I hope you understand what I mean. And people generally are too optimistic and overconfident in our own abilities. It's kind of dissimilar from that last point, but we tend to think we're better than investors than we actually are, and we don't really see the effect of luck in our past performance or in others' past performances. So we always become optimistic and overconfident. And he says that people create scenarios in their head in which it's unrealistically close to a best case scenario. And he also says that most people should just invest in index funds. So if you know what an index fund is, just tracks the stock market. And like if you're an individual investor, stock picker, individual stock picker like me, this is kind of like surprising, but he says 99% people should just invest in index funds because so few actually beat the market and would be better off just investing in index funds. Yeah, he talks about uh, how hedge funds don't generally beat the market, and an experiment in which like individual investors like myself like track their performances, and turns out that randomly selected stocks actually performed better than um, most individual stock pickers. So that was quite surprising. So that's something to take on board. And he also says that like stocks that have the worst rating online tend to actually perform better than the stocks that have the best ratings online or wherever in the newspaper. And the reason for that, like stocks that have a low rating generally have been performing poorly overall, and stocks that are rated well have been performing well in recent times. And he talks about a regression to the mean. So the stocks that are underperforming compared to their usual performance generally will return to their average performance, and vice versa. Stocks that were performing very well will start to slow down. So that's kind of why it's good to be a contrarian in the market as well. Anchoring is, for example, do you know how much a microwave costs? If you went to the shop and want to buy a microwave, it could be anywhere in your head probably from €40 to €200. You don't really know. So anchoring is like a marketing technique where they'll have one microwave there and it's $200, and then they'll have another one there for $75, and you're obviously thinking, oh my god, what a good deal on the $75 microwave. But then if you go to another shop, they're all $60 or €60 or whatever. So that's anchoring. Kind of puts that figure in your head of where roughly it should be, and that acts like an anchor. So the other experiment was where they ask, um, the tallest. Do you believe the tallest redwood in the world, which is a type of tree, is greater than or less than 1,000 feet? And then they ask another group of people, do you believe the biggest redwood in the world is greater than or less than 250 feet? And obviously the answers were completely different. Or like they said, and then they were asked like, oh, how tall do you think it actually was? And the people with the $1,000 redwood question said like 800 feet, and the people with the 250-foot redwood question said around 400 feet. I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but that's just another example of anchoring. So that that kind of ties in with the stock market. Like a stock market's price acts like an anchor. So just be aware of that. It might not actually be a good value. And the science of availability, that basically means, like, for example, Tesla is always in the news, or whatever stocks that are always being talked about. You think about them a lot more, so you think they are going to do a lot. Like, it kind of exaggerates how, like, if everyone's saying, oh, it's so good, it's such a good stock, or such a bad stock, it exaggerates how much what you think of that stock in comparison to what it actually, how good or bad it actually is. So he talks about terrorism and plane crashes in the book, and the science of availability. And everyone thinks plane crashes and terrorism, because they're always in the news, are way more frequent than they actually are. Before we move on, I just want to say a couple more words on the difference between System 1 and System 2. So System 2, it's more your logical brain, and it requires a lot more energy to deploy. System 1 is kind of your autopilot brain, and it doesn't really, like, you can, it's kind of, if you're just drifting through your day. System 2 actually requires a lot of uh, brain juice, if you know what I mean. Okay, now what does he recommend? I've kind of already touched on this. Um, he says, I already mentioned the first point, but the second point, he says, don't bother looking at the daily fluctuations in price. And it's kind of to do with the loss aversion. His idea there is, if you're looking at the daily fluctuations in price, you're seeing all these daily losses and all these daily gains. The daily losses will mean more to you than the daily gains. So it will just kind of mess with your head and make you uh, make bad decisions. So he recommends just looking at your portfolio once a quarter. Uh, I, I wouldn't agree with that myself, and I don't think I could do that, because if a stock really jumps, I need to be able to be aware of that, in my opinion. Um, but yeah, definitely don't be constantly looking at your stocks and making quick decisions. If the stock jumps, just jumps up or jumps down, just let it settle, see what happens. Take your time before you make a decision on whether to buy or sell, and rely on rules. So in this point, he's saying um, to just put the same amount of money into the market every single month, no matter what's happening. So at the moment, the stock market's going crazy. It's going up, 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 up. So I've been kind of hesitant to put more money into it. But he's saying just always put the same amount in every month, because we don't know when the next stock market crash is going to be, or when the stock market's going to go up, or when it's going to go down. So just rely on rules. Don't try and time the market. That's the point there, and you'll fare better, because we really don't have any clue. And trying to think, oh, I'm smart, I don't think I should be investing right now, or oh, I'm smart, I think I should be buying more stocks than I normally would right now. That's usually works out worse than if you just buy stocks the same amount each month. We've kind of talked about the regression to the mean, and recognizing luck in your outcomes. Um, yeah, people don't put any value on luck. If something works out really well, everyone thinks the person who made that decision, whether it be your own self or someone else, is a genius, or that it was that thing was completely self evident. Or in the other case, if something unlucky happens, and someone needs to blame, someone made a bad decision, it's all their fault. They're so stupid. How could they make such a bad decision, when it really was just really like there's such a large percentage of just good or bad luck. And yeah, finally, just says dollar cost average, which we kind of talked about, and hold for the long term. The last thing, I didn't actually write it in this slide, but people put too much emphasis. This is kind of tied in with the luck point. People put too much faith and emphasis in the CEO of a company, when the CEO doesn't really have such a big impact on the stock price or on how well the company is doing. There's some he makes up such a small proportion of how well a company does. And like this isn't just hearsay. This is like everything I've said has been backed up with like uh, findings from his experiments. Uh, so yeah, CEOs generally don't do as much as they might seem. Like they don't have such an effect on the stock or on the company as they might seem. It might just be a few percent or whatever. uh, and he kind of gives the example of General Electric, who had I forget his name, but they had a really top CEO where everyone thought he was amazing, but then the stock obviously didn't do very well at all. um, so that was a run through of Thinking Fast and Slow. I hope you liked the video, and I really recommend you give this a read. It's quite a hard book to get through, even though it looks kind of short. It's really small letters, small font, and it takes a long time to absorb and go through all the tests, all the experiments there. Uses a lot of your system two brain to actually work out what's going on. So thank you so much for watching, and please drop a like on the video if you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.